Namaskar, this is Dr. Renita Mazumdar, and I will continue with the lecture on gender identity development post-Freud with Nancy Chodorow, but there are a couple of requests I have for you. First, please subscribe to our channel, Swaka Harshita Foundation, where we provide not only lectures and education, but also therapy for adults and children. And also there are links in the comment section where you can donate to our foundation, because this is a non-profit organization. And as I said, you have to be a little patient. I'll build this up to genocide, the definition of genocide, both Indic and Western. And ultimately, we will talk about Hindu genocide and the reluctance to speak about it. So we talked about Freud and how he talks about gender identity development. Next, we are going to talk about Nancy Chodorow, who is both a psychoanalyst, trained in psychoanalysis, and also a sociologist. She also talks about gender identity development, but in a sociological way, not a psychoanalytic way. So what is her take on gender identity development? She concentrates mainly on capitalism. So what is capitalism? It's where for the first time you have several things. First of all, the expansion of the market, which means that we talked about it with Marxism, the expansion of exchange value over use value. So people no longer produce to use them, they no longer produce their food to consume, but to exchange, to make profit. And also for the first time in history, we have a thing called wage labor, which is where we sell the labor in order, and in return we get wages, which is the universal commodity of exchange. It is the standard by which labor is measured. And it's also free labor to some extent, outside of the serfdom where labor was controlled. So someone who is a worker is not a serf. He can go and sell, or she can go and sell her labor in the market in return for wages, not anything else. It's not a barter system anymore. Now, according to Nancy Chodorow, in this capitalist market, you need two kinds of identities: an individualistic identity, who is strong, who can compete, very similar to what Freud says happened after the castration complex. The male knows that if he goes for infinite pleasure and masturbation of his phallus organ of pleasure will be cut off. So he puts a boundary, he possesses the phallus, he consolidates his male identity, and his desire for the phallic mother and infinite pleasure goes into the unconscious. So it's a consolidated identity. And Nancy Chodorow is saying this is the kind of identity you need: individualistic, strong, competitive, self-assured, to compete in the capitalist market. As opposed to that, the feminine identity is diffused. It's not so consolidated. She finds that her clitoris is left, which is a cut-off phallus. We talked about it for Freud. There is no such thing as a man and a woman. It's a man and a not man, castrated man. She also realizes her mother doesn't have the phallus, the organ of pleasure, to give to her. So she runs to father, then she runs to mother. And she settles for her biological destiny, which is substituting her original desire for the desire for phallus to a desire from baby from father, or father substitute. And so her identity is not as strong, it's a dependent identity. And Nancy Chodorow says this is the kind of identity you need to nurture: caring, relational, dependent, not you or I, but you and I, continuous care identity. You need a specific kind of identity to give care. Care labor was not still an exchange value when she was writing it in the 1970s. Now even care, babysitting, etc. is more, it has more an exchange value. So this is the kind of identity, according to Nancy Chodorow, develops as a result of the way the market and the home, you can say the public and the private, the oikos and the market are arranged. You need a strong identity, competitive, individualistic, the male identity, not necessarily the embodiment of the male, and a caring, dependent, not so strong, diffused identity, the feminine identity, again, not only an embodiment of the feminine. So this is more or less her take. But she says one very additionally interesting thing. She says, because the labor of mothering goes to women, and just as Althusser says that labor power produces labor in ideology. You go on repeating the same thing. It's the same thing. The mothers produce these two identities. They produce strong males, and they also produce mothering, nurturing identity of the female. So mothering reproduces mothering. They go on perpetuating the system. They produce the identities and perpetuating system. Why? Because women mother. Women with dependent identity create the male identity and the female identity. Universally, globally, it's women who mother. Mothering is a social job. It's a social division of labor. It's not biological, but women who are biological creatures, they mother. Can men mother? Yes, if their identities change of caring, nurturing, etc. But that has not happened. So it's the women and the male identities are reproduced by this cultural factor of women mothering. So what Nancy Chodorow does is she takes psychoanalysis but infuses it with sociology and the capitalist market, and she gives us a new version of male and female gender identity development. So this is the short lecture for today. We'll continue with this. Namaskar.